Welcome to another episode of the Carry Trainer Higher Line podcast. Hey guys, welcome to another episode of the Higher Line podcast. Got two dudes on here you've seen many times. My buddy Zee Durham, who was apparently making Christmas gifts in the backyard like a good little elf with that hat on. Now we see the top. And retired Sheriff Andy Hughes from Southern Alabama. Thanks, guys. This is the first time I think we've ever done a three-way one of these. What are you drinking? Is that like, is that Labatt Blue?
It's a malt liquor. No, I'm just kidding. The Bang.
I'm just kidding. So we decided, we were talking the other day, Zee, Green Beret, black belt Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, specialist in CQB, and Andy. Andy, how many years did you do as a copper? 30?
30, yeah, I did 30.
Yeah. 30 of which, like a decade, you were the elected sheriff?
Yeah, my next to the last gig, I was a sheriff in Houston County, Alabama for 2 terms, 8 years. And
8
then
years.
I was the tactical operations chief for the state of Alabama for my last couple years out of my 30.
And so that was like overseeing all special operations stuff for the Department of Homeland Security there in the state?
Yeah, I was in charge of aviation, the statewide tactical team, and the EOD unit for the state of Alabama.
So training and what we're going to talk about today, you guys both have like some backgrounds that will support your opinions. That's all I was trying to get the listener to key into. So
I don't know. He said he only did 30 years, so.
Right? That's funny. I was talking with Zee the other day. So a thing that constantly comes up is how we train in military, law enforcement, general public to get a result, and how oftentimes we see with all of the video footage that's leaked out these days or published, we see the results of bad training, improper training, or the lack of adhering to training. I guess we could just like, so what we talked about was like taking a couple instances and just talking about the occurrence that we see footage on, but not from the perspective of like Breaking Bad on the people in the video, but talking about maybe other ways things could have been approached. Wasn't that kind of the premise?
Right. Yeah.
So I guess we'll start with the video that we all three saw. That female officer was just like a week or two ago that we saw that vid, and we'll post a link up. If you guys are watching this on YouTube, we'll post a link up. If you are listening, you'll just have to hear our verbal descriptions. But the scene opens where a female officer with a body cam on is in a house with a middle-aged dude that looks to be either under the influence or possibly maybe having some type of mental disconnect. And his mother, who was probably, 60s, 70s, is trying to intervene and calm this guy down. And as the scene unfolds, the officer is giving him commands which seemed kind of incongruent, didn't they? They was like, she's telling her, I'm going to Mirandize you and do this, do that. And this guy was basically kind of drunk and belligerent. Does that sound about right?
Yeah. You know, Mickey, from a law enforcement standpoint, first of all, she was outside of the house whenever she first encountered the suspect. And, where the video actually picks up at is she's reading the guy his Miranda rights, which was kind of strange to me because this was not a custodial arrest and she was not required to read him Miranda at that point because she was not controlling any kind of exercise over his freedom of movement at the time. So, and the thing about it is everybody who's ever watched a cop program on TV realizes that when you get arrested, they read you your Miranda rights. So immediately, this guy probably went into a defensive mode when she starts reading him his rights because he's thinking then I'm going to jail. In mental patients, if you're dealing with a mental patient, and I've dealt with a lot of them over the years, and as a sheriff, part of our function as a sheriff's office was to pick up mentally ill persons on certain court orders to have them committed to a facility for an evaluation. So, we dealt with them quite a bit. And some of the damnedest fights that I've ever been in have been with mental patients. And, they're just not in their right mind. They're off their medication. Then just like this situation, you've got another antagonist in the picture where you've got a family member. They want something done with the mental patient, but they don't want you to hurt the mental patient. You're trying not to get hurt. And it's just it's a real cluster a lot of times when you're dealing with these mental patients.
Well, that's the part I think that we all keyed into with that video. She was there for a reason, right? There was a reason that she was called to the house or sent to the house, but it was like she got locked up, vapor locked in this quest to exert her authority. I know one of the things we talked about as we decided to do this was the intention wasn't to try to impugn anybody in their work, but to just really hash out some of the stuff we all picked up on and how, and then be able to give that information to the people listening or viewing so they can apply it to themselves in their own training. So ultimately, just for the viewers, the way that this culminates is she goes hands-on with this guy in a house alone, and he was a big man, and I don't know what she looked like, but it was a female, so there was probably a disparity of force physically. She ends up drawing her pistol and I believe accidentally shooting the mother. Partner comes in and face kicks this guy as he's on his hands and knees, and they get him cuffed up, and he may have been shot as well. But the whole thing, when it's done, you're like, what the hell did I just watch? Like, why did any of this happen? So that's where
to his point, I felt like, you said you kind of read the Miranda rights preemptively, and it may have escalated the situation. Am I coming in all right?
Yeah, you sound good.
You're good.
So also, the guy was kind of resistant, right? He got a little defensive, was not complying. She was talking to him, but she never tried to de-escalate necessarily. Like, she continued to escalate with her tone. It was obvious that he wasn't acknowledging her authority in that situation, which is a person's choice, right? They can acknowledge your authority or not, and you can't count on that. Just like my kids, I talked to you about this, Mick. Kids get to a certain age, and it's not good enough to say, do it because I'm your dad and I told you. You got to give them reasons, and you got to negotiate with them a little bit. But she continued to have the guy telling him to come downstairs, and from a safety perspective, I see that you don't want the guy to disappear after you've interacted with him, and you don't know what his mental state is, or I don't even know the reason she was called out there. Potentially dangerous. Maybe she had information we didn't have. But yeah, you don't want him to go out of eyesight where he can get a hold of a weapon or something like that. But once he finally settles on the stairs and sits down, she continues to try to turn it into a principal issue where she's saying, come down right now.
Respect my authority.
Yeah, respect my authority. Mm-hmm. Come down. And at that point, in my opinion, with the knowledge that I have just from looking at the videos, I've got plenty of time at that point. And she's I think she's a deputy as well, so she's got her support is further than what it typically is for a police department. She's in the county, it seemed like, and it took a while for the other guy to get there. Well, relatively, it took a while. So she's going with this back and forth, this little power struggle with this guy. With no real reason at that point, because time was on her side. He's sitting there. He's sitting still at that point. He's not causing harm to anybody else, himself or her. She had reaction time based off the distance between them, and she just wanted him to listen to what she was saying. And I think she must have been new. Maybe she hadn't interacted with people before a little bit and didn't understand, that escalation factor that you can cause yourself sometimes, even if you're in the position of authority. It doesn't serve anybody well to escalate the situation yourself if you don't have to. Mm-hmm. She just kept pushing that issue. Come back to me. Come downstairs right now, or I'm going to do this, or I'm going to do that, or I'm going to pull this out or pull that out. And really, I couldn't see a reason why she was in such a hurry at that point. Yeah, I know that you want to get the job over with and done with, and everything's safe and secure in in a quick time frame, right? That's better for everybody involved, most likely. But at that point, she stand to gain to lose a lot by getting in that power struggle.
Mm-hmm.
And that just really put her behind the power curve. And then that's where things continued to escalate. She went up there and she started to put hands on her. I think she drew her gun, and her mother was scared, and he reacted because of that. So it was just
he thought she was going to hurt his mom as well.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah.
So I think like go ahead. You're going to say something.
Yeah. When you approach mental patients, you've got to approach they're maybe not really doing anything criminal in nature. So, you need to take that authority and maybe stick it in your back pocket for just a little bit and be a person. And when you approach these mental patients, you need to talk to them in a manner and a certain tone. And, it's like, hey, Joe, I'm Deputy Hughes. Listen, your mom called and said y'all having some problems today. Would you mind telling me what's going on today? You want to tell me your side of the story here, and engage them in some conversation, especially when you're trying to wait for some backup to get there. You're a small female officer who is less powerful and smaller in stature than this guy is, and you're the only one there too from your side. You've got him, and you got his mother there. And a lot of times we see these domestic or even mental situations where you go to hurting the person that they've called you on, and then you have another party jump on you also. So you want to start way at the bottom with your use of force continuum as far as you can get down low with voice commands, and do it in such a manner where you're requesting things from them and asking them to tell you a story about what's going on, and try to calm them. And like I said, you don't want to have to de-escalate, so don't escalate to start with.
So that begs the question then, when we look at these things, and I got to say it again, the nature of this discussion isn't to pick apart that officer's actions. It's really to pontificate on the totality of what we're seeing in America. Because on one side, we've got a large swath of citizens that no longer respect the law, which is like, I have a speech on that. The officers are doing my will. Me and my friends that make up our community, we empower the cops to say, keep everybody on our level playing field of niceness, and we collectively say you get to walk around and tell people when they're out of line. So like that scenario, in the scenarios that we see that happen like that, it begs the question, is that person there to do the will of the people, or do they let their emotions control them, or something else for that matter? You get what I'm saying?
Right. Yeah.
So as we start delving into this, like something to add to the story, you sent it yesterday. I don't know if you saw this, Zee. The mayor of Minneapolis recently, I think you and I talked about this, Zee, right?
Yeah.
The mayor of Minneapolis recently announced that no law enforcement in the city will be receiving, quote, warrior-style training. And actually, they've gone so far as to say that even some of those officers off duty or on their own time can be reprimanded for, quote, warrior style training, end quote. So like there's like one end of the spectrum, and then the other is, and like his other words on that, where we're trying to develop officers that are part of the community, and I get that, but cops are not there to, they're not there to serve soup. They're there to arrest criminals. Like, so there's like this weird paradigm shift in America where, like, you were around long enough ago, Andy, that policing was different than it is now. Talk on that for a second.
Right. Policing has evolved over the years, and I'll be the first to say that a lot of law enforcement agencies have, and our officers have taken it just a little too far with the militarization. Now, just like the situation we had in Jersey City the other day, a lot of people want to argue against the militarization of our law enforcement, but just think about that situation the other day. If that had not had access to that Bearcat or access to some other military type equipment, maybe that they had gotten off a 1033 program, if they could.
Real quick, because you're dropping a lot of stuff, make sure the listeners know what you're talking about, because this could be listened to a year from now.
Sure, yeah. If they would not have had an armored vehicle to have breached the front of that store and engaged those terrorists with and kill them, then that incident could have went on for a lot longer than it did, endangering other civilians and other law enforcement officers too. So using that tool, which a lot of people would refer to as a militarization of our law enforcement, was a good thing. But I have seen agencies and officers take it to the point of maybe it's us against them, and it's not always us against them, because there in law enforcement there are only two kind of people that we deal with: bad people and good people who are having a bad day. Okay, so you're either dealing with a bad guy, or you're dealing with somebody that's had a traffic accident, or they've had their lawnmower stolen, or they've lost their child, or their house has been broken into, or whatever. And you've got to be able to switch back and forth between dealing with those two types of people. You can't be Billy Badass to Joe Blow citizen who's had their lawnmower stolen. There's no reason to be. And
Sure.
It's just like one of my old phrases I like to tell people, just like Patrick Swayze said in Roadhouse: be nice until it's time not to be nice anymore. We're not going to let people run over us. We're going to make sure that they know we have that authority, but you don't need to use that authority or broach that until it's time to do so. Not everybody out there is a bad guy, and some people. The one time that you go to their house, or the one time that you show up on a scene where they're at, that may be the one and only encounter with law enforcement they've ever had or ever will have. And sometimes people are upset,
Mm-hmm.
and you got to realize that. But you can't go in every situation being Billy Badass with your pants blouse over your boots, and we don't carry long guns, all the time. Sometimes I think it'd be a good thing if we could, but we don't want to. There's a fine line there. And another topic or another term that I like to use is peace officers. That's what cops were first called in this country, are peace officers, and it's our job to maintain the peace, in whatever manner that we can use to do that with. But we need to be peace officers first to keep the peace and to protect the public and put the bad guys in jail. It's a very big balancing act, and a lot of times it's hard to find individuals to hire as law enforcement officers who can do all that stuff. A lot of police administrators I know, they would get complaints on guys, and the people that call in complain would say, well, they were rude. What did they do that was rude? Well, I don't know. They were just rude. And you have some officers that are very friendly in nature and can handle stuff, be tactical, but be friendly. And then you've got some guys that just don't have, and girls that just don't have that personality. Everything they do is business. They're not trying to be an asshole or be mean or anything, but that's just the way they are. But it's a huge balancing act when you're dealing with the public.
Yeah. Well, you just brought up the New Jersey. So there's a good outcome, as good an outcome as you can have for a scenario like that. How about that hostage situation last week, 2 weeks ago, where innocent people were shot in the crossfire out on the freeway? And like there is, like Z, you saw that from your background working in training guys all over the world. You look at that and you must cringe, thinking like, what were they thinking?
Well, one thing about that particular situation, and we were talking about Minneapolis and the mayor saying no warrior training, right? First, you got to define what a warrior is, and any definition of warrior that I've ever seen was a positive definition, not a negative one. So I think his verbiage needs to be looked at there. That just goes to show between the lady with the guy that might be have a mental issue or be drunk, inebriated, whatever the case, and then the one that Andy's talking about with the armored vehicle, and then what you're just talking about on the freeway. It goes to show you the dynamic or the large degree of separation between what police officers, peace enforcement officers, whatever we call them, what their job entails, and that tells me right there that they have to have some warrior capabilities, because the most likely scenario, and Andy can speak to it better than me, I'm a VP of a security company, and I work security, and I train a lot of cops and security guys. So we look at that dynamic in the relationship between people and people in authority positions a lot. it tells me that they got a likely scenario is that you'll deal with somebody and maybe something bad won't happen. Maybe it'll be a run-of-the-mill misdemeanor or this or that, or traffic citations, or just talking to people and figuring out problems and solutions so nobody has to go to jail or whatever the case may be. But they're also there for that worst case scenario, and you got to have capabilities when it comes to worst case scenario, as seen by those last two situations that you just talked about, the armored vehicle and on the freeway.
Mm-hmm.
That's kind of some of the worst case scenarios that law enforcement officers have to deal with. So you got to have that capability, even though everyday life with a law enforcement officer might not be even anything near that situation, right?
Mm-hmm.
But what are they expected to do if they don't have the capability? You can't stop them training for the worst case scenario. And the way we train our guys, I train them, it's like, hey, you got to be able to handle the worst case scenario, whether we're talking about in a vacuum just grappling or shooting, right? You got to be able to handle the worst case scenario. And then we'll back it off a little bit. Now, when I know that you're confident based off of your competency and your preparation for the worst case scenario, that gives you a lot of freedom, bandwidth, free mental bandwidth, and emotional control to know how to handle those everyday run-of-the-mill situations so you don't overreact in everyday encounters, kind of like the girl with the dude. I feel like she was overreacting a little bit emotionally. She got into her emotions, probably because she's not seen much of a worst case scenario where she's been in the role of somebody whose authority wasn't respected, and the badge didn't get people to do what she wanted them to do, right? So she needed to see that worst case scenario. She needed to have somebody being on top of her, putting her in a bad spot, and letting her and seeing what her capabilities are in that situation to develop that composure. And that, I think, would have played into her decision-making process before any of that hands-on stuff happened. That would have played into the situation where, hey, she's confident in that everything's okay. She can handle it if it goes bad. So that makes her more calm and composed when dealing with someone that's not necessarily listening or complying with what you're asking. So on the freeway, though, those guys, not necessarily doing anything military-like, but they were required to act as a team, get online with one another, understand where they're shooting, the orientation of their fire, which is, I guess that's common firearms rules, but doing it as a team altogether and organizing your efforts is kind of like military, right? So they could have stood to benefit from somebody on the ground taking charge and directing fire and making sure they had certain guys shooting and certain guys being disciplined and watching elsewhere or moving cars or taking care of the public. I mean, there's all kinds of benefits to training in a tactical manner where you're organizing the efforts of multiple people or multiple officers. And I mean, that you've seen for yourself on that video, they would have benefited from having something like that or having some knowledge in that area,
Those kinds of scenarios, like you said, don't happen that often, but then when they do, they become the impetus for whole industry-wide, nationwide changes in training, like the Miami-Dade shootout. That's that one instance that happened all those years ago is used constantly for reasons why we change caliber and capacity and all different shooting drills.
I don't agree with knee-jerk reactions like big organizations do to big events, but you do have to be ready because their job may entail doing something that involves the worst case scenario where they're in for the fight of their lives. And that's going to help them, I think, treat people better when you're talking about community policing, right? And working with people. When you're confident about your abilities and you're composed under stress based off of this high level of training that you received, it helps you just do everything else better. When I talk to you and you're mad, you're cussing at me, calling me or whatever you're calling me, but I know I'm confident. And if I'm confident in what I'm able to do in that situation, and I know that my only option is not to shoot you, or my only option isn't to escalate things, then I can handle myself emotionally better in that situation. One feeds the other, right? Just being good at the lowest level doesn't make you automatically good at the highest level
So therein lies the problem. Like, and Andy will be able to answer this better than anybody. But like my time in politics, I was often intrigued listening to everybody's got a subject that they're passionate about. We need better schools. We need better roads. We need, better whatever. We need more highly trained cops. Well, Mayor of Minneapolis wants to train them in a certain way.
Got to save the turtles.
Right. Got to save the owls. And all of these things are important, but then there's only so much money and so much time to train. So then, like Andy, like you as a manager in that field, you got to sit and look at data. What do my guys and gals need, and what does the past history of our workspace, what does that tell us, right? Do they need to know how to slim jim cars open? Do they need to know how to deal with drunk guys and know how to maybe do CPR, because that's common? And, you get what I'm saying? So, like, comment on that.
Right. Well, I mean, training is a tricky thing, especially with a bigger agency. You've got certain topic areas that the state and the feds are going to require you to spend so many training hours per year. You've got people that have got to maintain certain certifications. They've got to do training in that certification to maintain their instructor status or whatever in their field. And then you've got your basic run-of-the-mill everyday training, and you got to have people on the street. And most agencies that I know of now, there's a definite recruiting crisis going on in the United States right now. It's hard to recruit good cops. Most agencies of any size that I know of are undermanned and they're overworked. Their call volume is high, and they're always short-staffed. And then you've got to fit the training in there with that. You've got to pay the guys and girls in law enforcement. You got to pay them, or you got to compensate them some way, or you've got to arrange a schedule where they can train on duty. And it's I'll tell you what, it's a tough thing to do. I mean, there's so many different areas out there, and a lot of people have a misconception whenever they see these shootouts and all on TV with cops. Everybody has this misconception that all cops are gun guys and girls. But a lot of cops, they see their weapon as only a tool. I mean, I was raised in a cop household. I've carried a gun for my whole entire life, and it's just it's my nature. But a lot of these officers, they go home at night. They'll take their gun off, they put it away, they don't put it on again to the next day. They don't train outside of whatever the agency gives them or requires, and they're not gun people, So and some people,
that begs a question. I want to just jump in real quick. Yeah. That begs a question. Sure. Are we hiring? And this will piss some cops off. I don't care. Are we hiring the right people? Are we the people? Like if we elect you our sheriff, I want to elect a sheriff. Or have my city council hire a police chief that's good at finding people that are good at doing the job. Like, I don't want to find firemen that are scared of fire.
Right. When I was a sheriff, I was very, very fortunate because I knew a lot of law enforcement officers within a 50-mile radius of our agency, and a lot of those guys and girls knew me. And I would, whenever I had an opening, I would seek out certain individuals to staff our department with. And these were people that I could pick and choose that I knew were good cops. Situations changed a little bit, and I've got a good friend of mine that's a police chief, and he'll tell you, he said, listen, we're hiring people not because they're the best candidates to be a law enforcement officer, but because we can't find a reason not to hire them. We've been through the cycle 2 or 3 times. This may be their 3rd time coming for an interview with the interview board, and they pass their polygraph. They have a clean background. They got a negative drug test, and you've got slots to fill. And you're filling these slots, and then you get
have people to work shifts.
Yeah, I mean, you got to cover the calls. I mean, the patrol is the meat and potatoes of a law enforcement agency, and you've got to have individuals out there that can catch those calls, or you're just going to continue to get backed up, and their response times are going to go up. The crimes that you're solving is going to go down, and public's going to be crying about that, and you're doing a disservice to the public. But it's a huge balancing act these days. I tell you what.
So the public, sees. I get this all the time from comments online. cops, all they do is shoot innocent people. Well, clearly that's not the case. We can look at the data that that's not the case. But then when it does happen, and it does happen, innocent people get shot by cops, by concealed carried citizens, you know, and the like. But when it does happen, and it's few and far between, people jump on it and they look at the training, right? How are these people? They're not being trained to identify threats, and not being trained to maybe be a little bit more calm, like Z was talking about in their approach. They may have escalated the situation. Comment on that.
You want me to comment on that, Mickey?
Yeah. We hear that so often that's, you know, that it's some people take it as 100% fact just because it's recited so often. What I'm saying is recited is that, you know, that one, cops kill innocent unarmed people all the time.
Oh, cops do. Yeah.
Comment on that, and then comment on just comment on that. Yeah.
There's around 800,000 cops in this country, about 330 million citizens in this country. So cops make up a very small percentage of the total population of this country, such as do preachers and teachers and that kind of thing. You know, when you've got 800,000 people, you're going to have some bad apples in there. You're not going to hire the best people. All cops are not good cops. I'm not, you know, I've been a cop for 30 years. I retired. I'm still involved in the security industry and working with off-duty cops. But I'm not going to sit here and tell you that the profession that I'm very, very proud to have been a part of for 30 years is not without its problems, just like any other profession. And it just goes back to the gene pool that you're trying to hire from also. And people just, you know, a lot of people don't have the dedication to civic duty. They don't have a calling to be a law enforcement officer. None of their family's been in law enforcement before. It doesn't pay very well. You know, my dad was a cop for 36 years, and he used to tell me, he said, son, you know why they call us police? And I said, why? He said, because we're the poorest men in town and the least thought of, you know, and police, you know, and, you know, a lot of times cops do get a bad rap, and usually, and some news organizations are making some of the good stuff public, you know, but most of the time when you hear something about the police, it's not going to be something positive. And most people that have to call the police, it's not because they've had a positive interaction or need the cops for something good either, you know.
Mm-hmm.
So, positivity doesn't attract viewers.
It doesn't, you know, and it's just, you know, they wanted to criticize everybody in Miami area the other day on the UPS pursuit and I tell you what, that was just a cluster. It was just a very shitty situation for those cops to have to deal with. Looking back on it, I don't know how long that they were on the interstate before they got into that traffic, but you know, my choice or my command, if I would have been, you know, on scene in that, would have been telling those guys, get that truck off the road somehow, shoot the tires out, put some spike strips, pit the truck, do whatever you got to do. And if you had a couple tactical guys at that point, they could have tried to effect a hostage rescue on the UPS driver in the truck. But you didn't need but about two guys to engage those individuals in that truck. You didn't need everybody on the scene. And a lot of that, I'm sure, you know, was sympathetic gunfire. I mean, those guys were catching fire. They didn't know what direction it was coming from. They were in a terrible crossfire situation. They were putting innocent civilians in a really bad situation. And it was just a shitty situation to deal with. But in my view, they should have got that truck stopped before it ever got to a high traffic volume area.
Yeah.
I'm glad you brought that up, Andy, if I may, Mick.
Please.
My wife and I were talking about that the other day because we were looking at it and we were discussing it. And I was telling her a story, you know, I was telling them how I could empathize with those police officers that made, like you said, sympathetic fire, Andy. It's a real thing. Like when you're not emotionally composed in stressful situations, you tend to do things that are wrong. You mess things up. That's how it goes. And anybody that's ever been fired at or shot at, there was a time they had to do it their first time, right? And you probably didn't react the way you wanted. Lucky for some of us, we survived it and we learned from it, and you got better as you went, right? And I've seen guys that were experienced. I've seen Green Berets that were experienced. We get fired at by just a little pop shot And the guys that are covering that sector should take care of that, and the rest of us maintain security like you do in a combat situation, right? You're disciplined, you maintain your security unless it's time to maneuver. And then everybody and their mama wanted to get their gun on, right? Because a lot of people are like, hey, I'm going to get my combat experience and I'm going to get my kill or whatever they're trying to do. And then everybody and their mama turns and starts shooting, right? And it really wasn't needed, didn't have good results. We lost security. And I've seen that with my own eyes. And that's guys that are supposed to be cream of the crop. And a lot of people's eyes did that. And that goes back to what we're saying about the warrior training, right? If you've never been in a situation like that, or if you're not allowing police officers to train for worst case scenarios, and the supervisors are the guys to take charge on the ground, to orient their fire, to give them direction and make sure things are going the way it's supposed to, even in that short amount of time that they had based off the video to react, right? Somebody could have been managing that to some degree, and instead of worrying about getting your gun on, you manage the situation, the totality of the situation. But I've seen that sympathetic gunfire. People, because you haven't seen it before, and maybe you're excited about it, which is a good thing. I mean, we want you to be courageous and do what you have to do when your life is threatened or other people's life is threatened. But at the same time, you have to be disciplined, and you have to understand what you need to do in order to organize your efforts. And so I empathize with those guys. And pointed back to Minneapolis, I say that you have to train guys. You have to train guys, not because we're trying to turn into a third world country environment where people's walking around with AK-47s on the streets and everything. Hopefully it never comes to that. But in those situations, those guys got to know how to deal or have some experience. It might not be the best ninjas out there or whatever, but they have to be exposed to it at some point and say, hey, this is what you could possibly be doing. If nothing, even if the organization can't provide that training, it's going to awaken some of these officers, awaken some of these soldiers or whoever's doing whatever job, and at least eliminate the ignorance factor. I didn't know that it was going to be that hard. I didn't know it was going to be like that. Well, now you know. So even if the organization can't provide you with that training, you should still be allowed to do it individually. Like if I know, like, hey, I had to take an honest account of my actions during that. I was scared to death. And I didn't do what I thought I should have done. I'm ashamed of that. So my organization maybe is not helping me to become confident in that area. Well, guess what I'm going to do? I'm going to make sure that I'm not feeling that way ever again in that type of situation. I'm going to prepare myself. So at the least bit, you can expose guys to some training so it can at least light a flame and open their eyes to what their capabilities or vulnerabilities are, right? So they can go out and find that solution for themselves. And you can't, obviously, I disagree with not allowing people to find these warrior solutions.
He's villainized it. It's like,
that's ridiculous. A warrior is a good thing.
Yeah, it's almost like they're comparing it to like these guys are going to go out in their free time and join like a racist group or something, and they're like comparing it to some negative activity.
Well, also it's wishful thinking. Just because if you got the best police department in the country and you have a great relationship with your community, that does not mean that something catastrophic cannot happen in that community. Sure. They have to be ready for that. We're people. History says it. No matter how good you are, how the authorities' relationship with the community, it doesn't matter how that goes. It doesn't mean they're not going to catch some of these worst case scenarios in their areas, right? It's going to happen.
Especially a city as big as Minneapolis.
Hell yeah! I mean, it doesn't matter. You could be as nice as you can, but they have to have those capabilities.
Yeah, you know what's going to happen. Go ahead.
Yeah, I'm sick and tired of these mayors and council members and county commission chairmen and all that getting in police business. They know absolutely nothing about law enforcement whatsoever, and they spout off a lot of stuff that they think is going to enhance their ability to get reelected by a certain group of individuals within their community. They say what they think that they want to hear. They have no concern for these cops who are out there, you know. And I posted something today on Instagram. It was a video from an old movie, Walking Tall, the original Walking Tall, and
I've been to Buford's grave.
Yeah, if you take a look at the video I posted today, and I've been a deputy sheriff, and I've been out there on the side of the road or in somebody's yard with no backup available at all whatsoever. You got to put up or shut up, and sometimes it's not an option to tuck your tail and run. And I was never one that was. I'd rather be dead than be branded a coward. I'll tell you that right now.
You also though are like 6'5", 285.
No. 6'3", 260. Okay, 6'3", 260. But but I'm sick and tired of these political pundits and people trying to tell cops what they're supposed to do when these son of a bitches have never been in a schoolyard fight, much less a fight where somebody's trying to take your weapon from you and you've got no backup anywhere nearby. You know, the thing about it is, whenever I envision the word or I envision a picture associated with the word warrior, to me, that means somebody who's fighting against evil. That's a warrior, you know? And,
protecting others.
I mean, in law enforcement, we have a force continuum that's supposed to be followed. And that force continuum goes from the lowest level, which is your mere presence on the scene, a guy in a uniform, guy with a badge on or whatever, all the way up to deadly force. And sometimes that force continuum, you may engage every single level before you have to resort to deadly force. But a lot of times it goes from your mere presence or your verbal commands all the way to deadly force in like 0.001 seconds. Mm-hmm. And that's where you need to be a warrior, if you want to save your life or somebody else's life. So, it's very wrong. We need to relate to the community. We need to be as nice as possible and dealing with the community. But if you're not a warrior, I don't want you riding with me. I don't want you working with me.
Makes good sense. What I was about to say is, what will happen. Communities, like, we have this huge cultural and moral shift in our country, as we have many times. There's good cultural shifts. We don't own people anymore. That's a good thing. People can be openly homosexual if they want to be, and it's not a crime. Like, that's like, I'm okay with certain cultural shifts, but something bad will happen. People of a community are going to have dead kids or dead people in their town, and they're going to find out when they look at how people were trained or not trained. They're going to swap out a mayor or swap out a police chief, but that won't bring back whoever got.
And like you're saying, the cultural shifts, like, I think politicians, just like Andy was saying, they're telling the community whatever
Zee,
they want to hear.
Like, now it's like you are an informant right now for the mob. You got like a little light on the side of you.
I know that. I had the window open and the sun's going down. Yeah, don't tell anybody. It's me. But like I was saying, it's like they'll say whatever the community wants to hear, or what they think the community wants to hear is going to get them votes. And the bottom line is this: you can't wish bad things away. Like, there's no period in history that we know of, in the world's history, as far back as we've got documented, that there was no violence, that there was no evil. It's not going to happen now, right? So just because you keep saying that we're not going to train for that and we're going to turn a blind eye to that because we're focusing on all the nice stuff and all the good stuff, doesn't mean that negative or evil stuff is not going to happen. And that's just ridiculous. It sounds like a crazy person coming up with these solutions to me, that if you're going to say that you don't train for the worst case scenario. Especially, I believe in capable citizens training for the worst case scenario, as a father, a husband, as a protector of my community, as somebody with specialized training that may be able to help someone else. I believe in that. So how much more do I believe that the guys that have that job to see potentially evil people or people doing evil things every day, how much more do I believe that they should be qualified and capable to do their job, right? They're seeing it every day. That's their job. And they carry a gun for that responsibility that they have, because they have to have lethal means to match whatever the threat can have.
Yeah.
Right.
True.
So I mean, it's just crazy to me. Like, you can't just say this is what we're focusing on. No warrior training, no learning how to fight. Yeah, I agree. And Mick and I talked about this yesterday, Andy, and I'm looking from the outside, but I understand an organizational or a cultural mindset. And I did a couple of college classes on modern policing, whatever, just to get as much knowledge as I could on this subject. But I know that there's tendency, because you deal with a lot of bad people or people having a bad day, like you said, Andy, like that's what you see all the time. So as a human, we're going to say, you start looking at people as numbers, looking at people as bad people, looking at people as criminals, because that's what you deal with all the time. You're immersed in it, right?
Mm-hmm.
So
Right.
I can understand, yeah, that could happen, but that's where leadership comes in. That's where guys like you, Andy, that's got experience, pass on that knowledge and the lessons learned. And guys, we cross-train between my experiences in the military with the law enforcement officers, and we can say, hey, this is what I've learned, not just as far as the tactics, techniques, and procedures that help us win in the worst case scenario, but also the emotional standpoint, the reasonable standpoint, dealing with people, being able to empathize and care about people
Right.
more than I care about the glory of the job or whatever, or not letting myself be conditioned to think as people as just criminals, because that's what I see all the time. So there's got to be some of that in there, obviously sprinkled in, to remind guys, hey, this is not the only job. You have to look at the bigger picture, not just what's in front of you.
Mm-hmm.
Right? Of course that's in there. Of course that's a problem, and because with humans, nothing's ever easy, right? We're humans. We're going to have the tendency to screw things up based off of whatever we're around most of the time or whatever we're immersed in. So, but you can't just eliminate that aspect of the training for police officers and pretend like it's not there. That's just crazy to me. That's like me saying, you know what? I choose not to pay attention to whatever bad is happening in the world. I'm just going to pretend it's not there. I'm going to drive like I don't care. I'm not going to do defensive driving, because I trust that everybody's going to drive the right way and follow all the rules and obey all the stop signs and red lights. So I'm never looking both ways. I don't need to.
I'm assuming if that mayor was listening to this conversation now, he would have something to say. I'm assuming he'd probably say we're taking some of it out of context, but then
he'd throw out some numbers, probably some data that still would be wouldn't support his argument. And then I would tell him, don't be general. If you're speaking from such a position of authority and power like he is, I consider a mayor pretty high, especially Minneapolis, position of high power and authority. Like, don't generalize with the terms that you use. Don't say warrior as if it's a bad thing. If you want to say, hey, we're not going to focus on, I don't know, some aspect of law enforcement training that maybe not be necessary or not a priority for whatever's going on in their city. Yeah, but you don't just generalize like that. You need to speak your words wisely, especially if you're making policy that's going to affect a lot of people, right? You need to be very deliberate and specific about what you're saying.
Yeah. And this is a city, Minneapolis, full of Somali gangs right now. I mean, a lot of stuff going on up there. I mean, he could have, like Zee said, he could have said it in a different manner. Choose your words wisely. He could have said something to the effect of, listen, guys, not only do we need to be warriors in the worst case scenario, but we need to be protectors and we need to be servants also. Throw it all in there, because it's a huge mix and it's a huge balancing act, like I said before, of the different roles that you have to be. I mean, I'll tell you what, I've been in situations where I've been in fights for my life before, where shots have been fired, and then I've been in situations where I'm trying to help somebody, or I've went home and got a pair of my shoes and taken them out to a person that was walking down the side of the road with no shoes on before, and that kind of thing, and went and bought people food. And it's not just me, but I mean, there's a multitude of officers out there that do kind things and nice things for people every single day. And like you said, and the thing about it is, you can be on that one call, and you can go in service off of that one call where you just help somebody, and it's going to be 0 to 100 on the next call you get on the radio. It's going to be a robbery in progress at a bank with a hostage. You're going from 0 to 100 miles an hour in a few seconds.
Every copper I know that's got a story of getting shot or having to shoot somebody, not everyone, but almost every one of those stories started with some mundane scenario. It wasn't, you know, a SWAT call out for some high risk warrant, which there is those as well. But almost every story, it was patrolling the neighborhood and this thing went down and it turned a really bad day.
Well, I think one that they use, from what I understand from the information I've gotten from cop friends, is that across the nation and a lot of police academies, they show that one video of the guy talking to, I think he come to a domestic violence call, something like that, and he had the guy outside and it was real cold and the guy had his hands in his sweatshirt or in his pockets, and the police officer, I guess he deemed him not much of a threat and allowed him to do that. And then the next thing you know, the guy pulls out a gun, shoots him, and runs off. I'm sure you've seen that, Andy.
Yeah.
From what I'm told, they use it everywhere to show that, hey, it can be a mundane, very, you know, complacent type situation, and then go from 0 to 100 because you don't know that person you're involved with. You don't know what their mindset is or what they have going on, or how motivated they are not to go to jail. So,
right.
This is this problem is stemmed from the public. You know, like, side note, the state of Washington right now is just like Virginia, fixing to create a bunch of very, I hate the overused word tyrannical gun laws, but they're doing it in Washington. And some friends there, I'm helping them get petitions just to get something on the ballot is all they're trying to do. And my friends are saying these citizens aren't going to do anything. And like, you go to like the city like Minneapolis or other places, if the actual public realized, hey, the men and women that are protecting us are not being trained correctly, and now in a systemic way are having like this very important aspect of training taken away. What's that? Is that a smoke alarm? What am I hearing? Is it the ringing in my head? It's a systemic problem of citizens not taking an active role in who's governing them and who's making policy and setting the course of action. You know, I think if most citizens understood what was happening, they'd think different. But people got their jobs and their kids and school and all that stuff. They can't pay attention.
Yeah, Mickey, you know, a lot of people have blinders on. They live in their little world. They travel from their house to their job, to their kids' school, to the ballpark, and back home. A lot of people don't watch the news. They don't try to find out things for themselves, and they're ignorant. And when I say ignorant, I don't mean that they're ignorant because they're dumb, but they're ignorant because they choose to be ignorant. And they don't know what's going on in the world that surrounds them. And the only thing that they may see on the news is usually not going to be something good about law enforcement either. It's going to be something bad. And they don't see that everyday stuff that goes on every day. You know, there's a lot of cops getting a lot of fights and getting tussles, and you know, they may hurt somebody, you know, outside of having to shoot somebody, and people never hear about that stuff. That's just regular everyday stuff. You know, they don't hear about it though. So they just don't know what it's like, you know.
If the public demanded a certain type of, I brought up fire departments. If all of a sudden fire chiefs and fire commissions just said, you know what, it's expensive to have these highly stocked ambulances. We're just gonna take like bottled water and Band-Aids on the ambulances. The public could say, what are you, nuts? You know, like, I might have a heart attack. I might have, you know, I might have a leg cut off. I need you to have stuff. Like, people would be upset about it. So, like, if people demand that the public schools have heat and air conditioning, and, you know, like, if we want our kids comfortable. It's as if people don't demand the same level of policing. That's what I think one of the issues is. Like, I want cops that'll show up and kick a door down to the local grade school and not linger outside like what happened in Florida while kids get murdered.
Right.
Well, one thing, you know, you hear these people that protest against police officers where they don't really understand, and they have those one-sided arguments. And I was talking to you about this, Mick, is they'll say stuff like, you know, you hear people say all the time, police, and they need to do this and do that and respect these families respect the community. Well, they lose all credibility with their argument when they want police officers to be sympathetic or empathetic to the citizens, but they're not going to be sympathetic or empathetic to a police officer because they're just a human, just like you are. Like, so what one human doesn't deserve what the other humans deserve. Like, so if a police officer can make a mistake and you could say, well, my son-in-law got shot robbing a place, he made a mistake, he shouldn't have been shot for it or whatever. I've seen plenty of arguments about stuff like that, even when the citizen in question or the victim, the suspect was killed and they were doing wrong. They put themselves in a situation where it was dangerous.
Citywide and nationwide riots have been started because of that shit.
Well, they want rationalization. They want so-called justice for that, right? But at the same time, they don't want to treat cops as if they're humans. Like, and the bottom line is, if you can't respect both sides as humans, then you lose credibility in your argument. You can't just say all police suck, all police are this or that, and they're shitheads. That's like me saying, well, that's like a cop saying all citizens are criminals. I'm just waiting on you to catch you, or everybody in this ghetto over here is a shithead. So we're gonna treat them like that. You know, it don't go. It's got to go both ways. It can't just be one way, right? So both sides deserve the respect and the empathy, but one side is dealing with somebody that usually, if a police officer is called, it's not like they just showed up haphazardly, like on their own because they wanted to mess with somebody. I'm sure there's situations like that, but Andy can speak to it better than me. There's calls. They're brought into situations. There's something that's brought them into a situation, and they have to be there, right? So, and people don't look at it like that. You have to look at both sides.
It seems like, you know, as we talk through this, as in many of our conversations, really what's required is more thoughtful, caring, introspective people that make intelligent choices. That's the my great grandfather was a detective in Chicago. I've told you this, Andy, like reading his old notes and stuff. The stuff that those guys did in the in the teens and in 20s and 30s. You know, they'd all be in jail now, but different times though. And now we've got cops have to be first responders medically. They got to be able to deal with the mentally ill, the physically ill, the inebriated, intoxicated drug addict. They got to be able to dish out Narcan for opioid addicts. They got to be able to be traffic investigators. They got to be detectives gathering evidence. They got to be nice to kids. You know, just like on and on and on. And then you do all that for, in many places, like up here in Chicagoland, guys make good living because we've got strong unions in this state. But there's places I talk to guys about what they make, and the dudes at the grocery store make as much money or more money than they do.
Yeah. Yeah, you know, some of these cops these days, they're making $11, $12 an hour. It's barely above minimum wage to go out and risk their life on a daily basis, and they're doing it just because their love for the job. And you know, I'm gonna issue another disclaimer. You know, law enforcement is basically the love of my life. It's been something I've lived and done for my entire life. You know, my dad's profession and my own 30-year career. But I'm not going to sit here and tell you that every cop out there is a good person or does the right thing in every situation. I've had to discipline cops who are under my command at the municipal, agency, county, and state level, and I've had to talk to them and have some conversations with some of them. And when I was sheriff, I arrested 3 of my own deputies that worked in various capacities within the sheriff's office, you know, because they had committed crimes, and I had no qualms at all about doing the right thing and putting those individuals in jail when they thought they were above the law either. So, not, you know, I'm not going to say every cop's a good cop, but there's a very minute 1/100th of a 1% that are not.
I agree. I don't think we're trying to sit here and blow smoke and say just if you don a badge, you have to be worthy of that respect. And I think most folks are. You know, I myself and Zee, I think most of the coppers that we interact with are we are lucky, I should say, because most of the ones we interact with are the guys and gals that train. They're doing it on their own time. They show up in our classes, or they come do work for Z or something of that nature. Should somebody in these professions be expected to train on their own time? You know, does a mailman have to stay fit, or a mail lady, so they can deliver the mail every day? Does you know, the butcher that works for the local grocery store, does he have to go home and be expected to read at night? That's kind of a hard thing. This profession is, most jobs you don't have to learn on your own, is what I'm saying.
Right. You know, it's got to be in my mind and in my heart, it was always a commitment. I mean, there's no doubt. I couldn't tell you how many dollars of my own money I forked out for equipment and gear and training that was not provided, you know, to me or for me. And I went out and sought out that extra piece of equipment, or that nicer piece of equipment or gear, or sought out that training on my own, or took my own vacation time at the very least to go attend training and that kind of thing and all. And if you're really committed to the job and you want to be the very best, you'll do that. But I've heard cops say this before, and I'm not going to say these guys are bad cops, but I've seen those before. Like, you know, damn it, if they wanted me to have that, they'd issued it to me. If they wanted me to go to this kind of training, they'd pay for me to go. You know, and that's the guys that go do their shift, and they go home and they don't think about it after they're off the clock. They don't commit any time or any effort to being a better cop, you know, while they're off either. So I'm not going to condemn them for that, but that's just a different mindset, you know.
Yeah, I won't condemn people the same. You know, soldiers do the same thing, and because there's different aspects of service, right? Some people have different jobs, or they're expected to do different things when you get down to the nuts and bolts of their specific duties as they serve in whatever capacity. But bottom line is this: with a soldier, a police officer, or anybody else, where the ramifications of the decisions you make can be huge, right? Meaning you could lose your life, somebody else could lose their life, or somebody could be injured very badly. Like, when your job means that much and can potentially mean catastrophe if not done right, that's a little more motivation than most jobs or careers out there to go out and seek your own training, at least in order for you to be competent and confident in that area. Yeah, I mean, if I'm a grocery bagger, I'm not going to do a lot of extra work to train myself. I'm going to get everything I need at work, most likely, because what's the likelihood of me getting into something that is going to be catastrophic in nature if I mess up my job? I mean, there's little to no chance, right? A police officer, a soldier, somebody that your job inherently comes with danger, violence, the threat of life or injury, right? So that, to me, means you have a responsibility, and it's like turning a blind eye to the bad things in the world if you turn a blind eye to what you actually need, because you say the organization didn't provide me with that, so they don't want me to have it, or it's not my responsibility, it's theirs. That's ridiculous. That sounds to me like a crazy person talking again. Like, come on, man. You know how the world, the institutions work when it comes to politics and authority organizations, right? You know how that works. Right, they're going to do the check the block stuff, especially huge organizations, right? It's check the block, reduce their liability, right? Mitigate the risk, but it's not necessarily everything you need as an individual. And if I'm the person going out and my skills are what I'm relying on every day when I'm on the ground, then you can't just say, well, if this happens and I'm not prepared, that's somebody else's fault. It's your responsibility, your individual responsibility. If you're lacking somewhere, you need to make up for that.
Yeah. Do you want to go home to do you want to go home to your kids and your wife every day? Do you want to save your own life? You know, and military, just like law enforcement, you're out there fighting for the guy next to you too. You know, you're out there for your partner. You know, I want to be physically fit enough, and I've always been one to, you know, look after my physical fitness, and, you know, I still ruck and lift weights and that kind of thing too. But, you know, if I got a guy over here, I want to be big and strong enough to drag him out of danger if he goes down. You know, I want to get him out of the way, out of the gunfire, and rescue him. I want him to do the same thing. And I think it's all about personal responsibility, no matter
This
what your
stuff
job
all
is.
sounds like the mindset of a warrior.
Oh,
No.
don't say that word.
Don't call us that word.
You are a warrior. You're a warrior for the good people. You're a warrior against evil. You're a warrior for your partners out there with you, whether it be law enforcement or military. And it's hard for people to understand. They just cannot understand the mindset of law enforcement or firefighters or military if they've never done the job. My dad he told me this. My dad was a smart guy, cop for a long time. I really respected him, and he told me this years ago, as I was getting into my law enforcement career. He said, "Son, you'll always have your friends from high school. You'll always have your buddies that you ran around with, but your best, true, closest friends will be other cops, because they're the only ones that know what you know. They're the only ones that know what you go through on a daily basis, what you think about. They're the only ones that can really relate to you." And I found that to be very, very true.
It's interesting. So this is like this totality of this conversation. There's a lot of different things that we touched on, but really, what I think we're talking about is having people that have excellence in themselves to demand a high level of output, to be able to. I got a friend. His name's Jerry. I won't say his last name because he's super private, but he retired recently. He's a friend of mine from up here. He was a Marine 25, 30 years ago, and he doesn't need to do it, but he's still during his law enforcement career, but still to this day, man, this guy's like super regimented in his physical fitness, and like he's in his 50s, but is more fit than many 20-year-olds. Every day he's doing pull-ups and sit-ups and runs. He literally wears expensive treadmills out because he runs so much to stay fit. And part of it might be a little vanity, wanting to look good, but he always didn't want to be the weak link. And I know so many of his friends, they'd make fun of him. Oh, you don't want to come out for drinks because you got to go home to the gym. And it's like that. That's what we need, dudes like that. So how do we hire guys like that? Can that be on the resume or on the job application rather?
That'd be great. And I think you get into things like that in the interview process and asking certain questions. But, you got so many cities, and the great thing about being a sheriff in the state of Alabama is you were autonomous. You had no personnel board to tell you who to hire. You had no, I did not even give a written test for deputy positions. I would hire people that were already certified cops, and you could ask whatever questions you wanted to ask. But there are a lot of cities that have these hiring processes. They have EEOC commissions and everybody else, and they've got to approve every question you're going to ask and every hoop that you've got to jump through. And we don't want to offend anybody by making them feel inferior, because they don't follow a physical fitness regimen on their own every day, or they don't have the mindset of a warrior and that kind of thing. And it's hard to ask those questions in a lot of these agencies that are trying to hire good cops.
So fundamental logic is lost nowadays, it seems, huh?
Say that again, Zee?
A fundamental logic is just lost nowadays because of the political correctness. People saying that people that are expected to defend us against evil on the home front here are not supposed to be warriors. You can't tell people things because, and here's a fundamental flaw in saying you make somebody feel something, right? Any therapist or anybody in the psychological industry will say you can't make people feel anything. Something they associate with something causes feelings inside them. A thought that they have causes their feelings, right? So, but people do say that you can't make people feel. I don't make them feel a damn thing. If the facts are that you can't lift me up, you can't do physically what is necessary for your job, especially in the worst case scenario, then you're not capable. You're out of shape. If that hurts you, then I'm sorry. The truth hurts sometimes. Now I can be nice when I say it, and I'm respectful, and I respect a human being for sure. I don't mean now because someone's out of shape, do I think they're a piece of shit or they're not valuable? No, not at all. No. Not at all. I just say, you need to do this. Your physical capability says you can't do that. So 2 + 2 = 4. that's how it is. It's a math equation.
Yeah. You know, Mick, whenever I used to do, we did a PT test for our deputies, for our new hires. And as a sheriff, as a head of an agency, I would actually go out to the PT test when these new applicants would come to run it. And I said, listen, guys and girls, I said, this is a minimal PT test that's required by the Alabama Peace Officer Standard and Training Commission. I said, but I'm not looking for minimal deputies. I want to see the best that you got out here. And I'd give them that little speech, and then you see those guys and girls out there that really wanted to get hired. They were out there busting their ass. They were doing more than the 25 push-ups in a minute. They were doing more than the 25 sit-ups in a minute. They were doing more than the 15, 28 mile and a half run. They were out there busting their butt because they knew what I expected out of them if they wanted to get hired.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Excellence.
Right. That's funny. The test here in Clarksville, they won't let you do anymore. Besides the run, I mean, you do the run on the time, but once you do the minimum sit-ups and push-ups, they're like, hey, you stop right there. And you're like,
One of the local sheriff's offices, when a couple years ago, one of the guys tried to implement like an annual physical fitness test just to keep guys up to snuff, and the unions fought it. And nope, once I'm hired, I can go into Turdville if I want to.
Like you should meet, at a minimum, you should be able to meet the job requirements.
Right.
So your job, if their policy says, you might have to run, you might have to fight for your life for 1 minute straight. Well, you better be physically capable of doing that. Not to mention the competence.
Mm-hmm.
Mick, we did.
Go ahead.
I had a PT test for our sheriff's office that I implemented. We did some research. We looked at other agencies in-service PT test and all that. And we put one together. And I told the guys and girls, I was like, listen, I'm not asking anybody to be a SEAL team member or an SF guy here as far as your physical fitness goes. I said, but I just want you to be in some reasonable form of physical fitness out here, able to do your job. I provided them with a weight room. I provided them with time on duty to conduct physical fitness training while they were working.
Nice.
Provided them all those things. And the thing about it is we set no age requirement. A lot of times it was, graded by age. And I told them, I said, listen, this bad guy, well, you got him up against the car fixing to handcuff him and he's fixing to resist. He's not going to turn around and say, oh, by the way, how old are you? So I'll know how much to resist. I said, they're going to resist or they're going to run no matter how old you are as a deputy. So we kind of graded, we graded it and put it out there. And the thing about it is we didn't tell anybody. It wasn't like the military, like, hey, I better start doing some running. I got a PT test coming up next month, that kind of thing. They didn't know when it was coming. A supervisor may get a call on a Friday afternoon and say, you have these 6 personnel at Westgate Park at 8:00 on Monday morning for their PT test. We did it twice a year for everybody that we had, sworn personnel, and it was
Nice.
totally unannounced. So they had motivation to stay physically fit year round.
I dig it. It seems like in many things, this is a pretty broad, our conversation meandered through a lot of things, and I just thought it would be a fun way to do this. And we said we'd try it a few times and see if people liked it, just delving into some of these topics. Like anything, we can't just implement some rules or laws and change it. It's a cultural issue, and all like people like us can do is try to provide good information and hope that the people that are listening that need it implement it. It doesn't matter if you're a cop or a baker or a school bus driver or an airline mechanic. Kick ass at it. Do a good job at it.
Right.
That's kind of like what higher level of using liberty is there, than like living a life of excellence. If we've got this nation where we're allowed to do that, why not kick ass?
Right.
Somebody's going to think you're being a creep sitting in the parking lot on your phone.
Hey, Mick, I was going to read a definition of a warrior real quick, and then I'm going to read what the Army wrote about it, the warrior ethos, they call it.
Let's hear it.
So a person engaged or experienced in warfare, obviously, or it says soldier. And then what is a war? It's a conflict between two entities or two sides, right? So good versus evil would be the most general fundamental war that we'd be in, right? Police officers are trying to keep the peace, right? What keeps the peace? Maintaining order and handling evil as it manifests in crimes or whatever the case may be, right? But the Army wrote this, and I know the Army's a big organization as well, but I do like their warrior ethos. And it says, the warrior ethos, there's 4 of them. It says, I will always place the mission first. So if the mission is me taking care of people, that's my mission. That's my broad mission. My specific mission could be, hey, I'm going out on these calls or this particular call at this particular time, whatever. And then I will never accept defeat. And I think that's generic enough. That means I won't accept defeat individually, mentally, emotionally. I'll bounce back, and I won't accept defeat when it comes to me having to get my brother's back, Andy, or my brother Mick, in the face of the mission. And then I will never quit. So even in the face of failure, even in the face of fatigue, even when the chips are down, I just won't quit. And then the last one is I will never leave a fallen comrade. So I'll never leave my buddies. I'll never leave my friends. I'll never leave my partners. I'll never leave my family. I'll never leave my friends. I'll never leave my peers in my career when the time comes. So if you go by the Army's warrior ethos and you use that to as your definition of a warrior, I think that's everything I want somebody to be right there, especially in the career of law enforcement or as a soldier or anybody that's responsible for protecting life. Right.
I think when we're done with this podcast and it's uploaded, I'm going to have to send it to the mayor's office up there and see if any of them listen. I will preface it, and now it's in the recording. I'll preface it that, hey, this is all over the internet. Maybe you should watch it because we talked about your mayor in it. I hope
the
you
term
listen,
warrior
Mayor.
The term warrior should never be associated with anything bad, in my opinion. A warrior is someone who is always fighting for the right. They're fighting against evil.
Well, I mean, there's definitely warriors. The Nazi soldiers had a warrior ethos, right?
Yeah, I guess you're right. They were fighting for something they thought were right, or their indoctrination. But when people think about a warrior in today's terms, it should be in a good sense. You shouldn't have some mayor who knows absolutely nothing about police work or working a beat or getting his ass kicked on the street out there trying to tell somebody they shouldn't be a warrior.
Yeah.
Well, if you're a Nazi, I'm sure you want your Nazis to be warriors, whether it's a bad cause or good cause. But your perspective, I guess, is good. But as a mayor, if you want your people that's out on the street, that's protecting others, you would want them to be a warrior in my mind. Like, I want you to be nice, but a warrior, they're warring against the other side, not everybody. Right. So I can understand that. Yeah. I don't have a conflict with every person out there just because they're in my community or because they've committed crimes. But if there's somebody that is, what's the word am I looking for? The enemy of my cause. So if they're the enemy of peace and I'm here for peace, then that's what I'm warring against. I'm going to be a warrior.
Very interesting stuff. We've got this time in history. We've been at war longer, which is almost comical thinking about it as I'm saying it. We've been at war longer than we've ever been in the history of our nation. And I've been saying it, and I think it's going to happen. And it is happening. We got guys like UZ that spent a lifetime in service, and then they come home, and you're now a vice president at a business. I got buddies. One of them is now in charge of training at NRA. I got other friends that have gone into politics, dudes that have gone into police work. And so now our nation is being permeated, and the fabric of our society's got all of these dudes and women that have spent a lifetime in that warrior mentality. I think it's a good thing. Like all of our grandfathers, that era, all of them were all veterans, and they became from janitor at the grade school to president. Like how many presidents were veterans for so many years. And now that's not the case because we had this big gap in history where we weren't at war. But I think that over the next decade or so, that's gotta change something. As long as the citizens of the country elect those people and put those people into positions of management and leadership and such.
Well,
sometimes
go ahead,
Go ahead, Z. Yeah, go ahead, Z.
I'm just saying it just depends, if our nation is going to continue to not use logic and turn a blind eye to reality, or are they going to, and they do that because it makes them feel good, I guess, escaping reality, or are they going to call it what it is? And humans are humans, and there will be evil, there will be bad things that happen, and you got to be ready for it no matter what. That don't mean we're paranoid. That don't mean we're overly zealous when it comes to conflict. That just means we're realists, in my opinion. Yeah. I know bad things happen, so I try to be ready for bad things. The more bad things happen to me, the more I'll be ready. The more likely it is, the more I'll be ready. Right. And hopefully people see that, but I don't think it's going that way. I'm not big into politics, but you understand when I say there's certain people or certain political entities that say that, everything needs to be given to people. Everything, stop worrying about this. Don't worry about conflict. Worry about all the good, happy things that make people happy, and turn a blind eye to everything else. And it's crazy. It's crazy. There's nothing supporting that's true. That now is different than any other time in history when there's always been bad things that happen.
Yeah,
sorry.
No, that's fine. I'm gonna say some stuff that's kind of goes along with what you just said, but I don't know what some of these people want that are so anti-law enforcement. Do they want anarchy in this country? I'm gonna tell you right now. Me and my family, we can handle our own business. I mean, if I can encounter violence with violence if need be, but a majority of the people in this country and a majority of people in the world, they don't have that capability. They don't have that mindset. They don't have the ability to be a so-called warrior. They don't have the physical or the physical skills or the mental capability to handle their own business if some people come and try to take all their stuff at their house. Majority of the people, they are really sheep and they're not going to hurt anybody. But, these people that are anti-law enforcement, do they want anarchy? Because I'm here to tell you right here, if we don't have laws, good laws, I'm not talking about some of these laws that some of these Democrats are trying to pass now, it's anti-gun, but if we didn't have a set of laws and we did not have a means to enforce those laws, and we need to enforce them fairly, then we would have anarchy. And majority of the people would 98% of the people in this country would be what we call a victim.
You better be a warrior if there's anarchy going on.
Exactly. Yeah.
That was kind of these guys' intent. The Federalist Papers, they knew all that time ago, if we don't have this constitution and codified system of how to live together, Locke wrote about it. We'd be like animals back in the woods, back in the prairie, just chewing each other up. Wolf against sheep and cougar against rabbit.
And that's what we are. We're animals without our civilized and reasonable way of handling things. That's what we are. We're animals.
Right.
And some of these people now that seek to empower people to make them think that whatever they want is what they should get, and it doesn't matter if it's somebody else's property or something somebody else has worked for or whatever. Once you empower people to think that way, and then you have no law enforcement or you have no effective law enforcement, then you're going to have anarchy, because those people are going to feel empowered to go out and take whatever they want to take, whether it's from you, me, or whoever.
Parting words, gentlemen. We've covered a lot of ground. I hope you guys listening, I hope you enjoyed the conversation. It was meandering at times, but I think we, if you guys listening or watching were hanging out having beers with Z and Andy and I, this is probably exactly what we would have talked about together. So just imagine you were just hanging out having a convo with us in a parking lot in the dark. Or in Z's attic in the dark.
Yeah, that's what we talk about. I think men like ourselves, and I consider Mickey a warrior. Andy, from what I know of you, I consider you a warrior, and from what I heard you speak, and I'm proud to know fellow warriors like yourselves.
Thank you.
And this is what I would be talking about, even if we're hanging out, because I'm passionate about it and because I believe in being capable for me and mine. And if I do my part here within my reach, then hopefully each one will teach one and reach one or whatever. And our nation will continue to be strong. And the people that are not living in reality will be the minority, not the majority. But like my parting words is this, Mick. So in simple, if you don't agree with anything we said, if you don't agree with me politically or any of us politically or in Second Amendment, guns, fighting, whatever the case may be, if that's not your bag, I'm cool with that. I don't judge anybody the best of my ability. But I do say this to everyone. Use critical thinking. Critical thinking is a lost art in our nation.
Right.
And you got to consider your source. Just because news said it, everything we know by now that the news is not there to benefit us necessarily. It's there to benefit their own organizations, right? So consider the source, anything you hear, find the facts, try to withhold a decision about something until you have enough information. That's all involved with critical thinking. So, and that's a class I took to get my associate's degree. They should be teaching it in middle school, in my opinion, if parents aren't teaching it still. So think critically. Look at both sides. Just because you're mad or emotional doesn't mean all the cops are wrong. Just because you're a cop and you see a lot of criminals doesn't mean all people are bad. And just because you're this doesn't mean you're that all the time. So think about it, get the facts, give people fair shakes, give certain viewpoints a fair shake, and get the facts. And then if you got the facts and you got enough information to help you make a decision, make your decision and stand by it. That's it. That's all I ask of anybody, and that's the fundamental mindset that I would like our nation to have.
I dig it. Thanks, man. Andy?
Hey, this has been great fun. I love getting into discussions and hearing people's viewpoint, being able to express my viewpoint. That's a great thing about America and the First Amendment. We can all do that, and we have to remember our rights end where somebody else's begins. I mean, I'm not here to push my agenda on anyone. I'm just here to express my opinions and my views and things that I think would be helpful to make our country and our communities a better place. And I think this is a thing that we need to do on a regular basis. I think we got the three of us here, and we got different viewpoints. And I'll tell you this: we may get into some conversations on one of these podcasts where all three of us don't agree, or two of us may agree and when the other one doesn't. Hey, and that's fine and good. Just like Zee said, critical thinking. I've taken some critical thinking courses in some of my law enforcement executive programs and all, and it's a great thing. I mean, and we need to have those discussions. And you may even change my mind or give me another viewpoint on something, But we need to. And it goes back to what Zee said. We need to be influencing other warriors for another generation. We can't let being warriors or being critical thinkers or people that are active in the military and law enforcement, people that are leaders in our community, we can't let that die with this generation or the next generation. It's got to be something that's carried on from generation to generation. And I think it's our job for us to influence others that are going to come behind us to carry this on too.
I think, and I'll add to that, not in a contrary way, it's our civic duty if we wish to proliferate our union to do it. When I hear people bitching about the state of affairs, the first thing I ask is, what do you do? Well, and guys will say, well, I serve. That's carrying one load. That load of passing on those customs and knowledge and way of life is part of it. Like Zee served, but he still got kids to raise to teach these things, and same with you and same with me. So I dig it. You guys listening, we appreciate your time. We appreciate your support. You guys, little business here. If you're out at the next S12, which is just outside of Nashville, the first week of May, Zee and I will be there, and there is a good possibility that Sheriff Andy will be out there. He's supposed to be out there this past go-around, but had an emergency with his family. But you'll get to come hang out with these guys in person. It's on carrytrainer.com. There is actually, depending on when you hear this podcast, an early bird rate that ends early 2020. And of course, that event comes around a couple times a year. All of our other events are up there. Zee has events all over the Nashville and greater region of that area. And Andy, tell us a little bit about what you do. You work for a company that does security.
Yeah, I'm the special projects manager for a company called First Guard LLC, and we provide off-duty law enforcement officers for businesses, corporations, and industries that need an extra level of protection that would require an off-duty law enforcement officer. We use cops who are from the local areas where the need is at. We do executive protection work. We do disaster recovery work and helping business continuity after disasters, whether it be
all over the place, all over the country.
Natural,
right?
yeah. We do it all over the country. We have other your regular security companies that we collaborate with and support them whenever they need that extra degree of protection. They call us, but we've got multiple projects going on all over the country right now. And it's First Guard LLC.
Very cool. On Instagram, you are A Hughes.
A Hughes 297.
297. Your body weight.
That was my call sign. That was my call sign.
I'm just kidding. A Hughes 297 and Instructor Zee on Instagram. Both good ways to get a hold of those guys. Dudes and dudettes, appreciate your time. This is Mickey with carrytrainer.com. Thank you for tuning in to another episode of the Higher Line podcast. If we catch you before Christmas, we hope you have a Merry Christmas and Happy New Year. And don't be a dickhead. I think that's a good way to end it. Do that. Bye now.
Good way. Enjoyed it.
Visit our website, carrytrainer.com, for information about classes held throughout the U.S., Carry Trainer apparel, and upcoming projects. You can also email us at training@carrytrainer.com for information about setting up your own private course or speaking engagement. Training@carrytrainer.com or carrytrainer.com.